Thank you. The next item of business is a motion to approve a statutory rule. Clerk, please read the motion.
That the draft period products Department of Education specified public service bodies regulations Northern Ireland 2024 be approved.
Thank you. I call on the Minister for Education to move the motion.
Madam Deputy Principal Speaker, I move the motion.
Okay, thank you, Minister. The Business Committee has agreed that there should be no time limit on this debate, and I call upon the Minister to open the debate on the motion.
Well, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I am pleased to bring these draft regulations to the Assembly for approval. The regulations will be made under powers conferred by the Period Products Free Provision Act of Northern Ireland 2022. And before I turn to the regulations themselves, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the enormous benefits of this provision. Free period products, which can be accessed easily and in a dignified way, will be life-changing for girls and women across Northern Ireland, particularly at a time when household budgets are under so much pressure. My department has already been providing free period products in schools under the Period Dignity Pilot Scheme for almost 3 years. Feedback from pupils and teachers has been overwhelmingly positive, as demonstrated by the responses to a survey when the pilot scheme was launched in September 2021. This initiative is not simply focused on period poverty. It aims to respect the dignity of our learners so that they can attend school confidently, take full part in activities and focus on their education. Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, members, no female should be prevented from fully participating in education simply because they have periods. I am delighted to say that the pilot scheme has been successful in this regard. In fact, 82% of pupils availing of the scheme said it increased their confidence in managing their periods in school. The pilot also provides education on periods, aiming to increase knowledge of pupils and teachers, male and female, and break down the stigma associated with periods. I am hopeful that this excellent educational support developed by the Northern Ireland Council for Curriculum Examinations and Assessment will continue. Turning to the regulations, the draft regulations, members will be aware that all departments in Northern Ireland must specify in regulation the public service bodies that will have duties under this Act. May I thank the Executive Office for establishing an interdepartmental working group to ensure that there is a coordinated approach. The powers provided under the Act to make these regulations are very specific. Departments must specify which of their bodies will be legally required to make sure free period products are available for use on their premises. As well as specifying public service bodies, the regulations may provide for descriptions of premises, persons, and when premises are to be treated as being in use. Given the policy intention of the Act to make products widely available, my department aims to minimise any limitations of this provision in making the regulations. My department is required to specify bodies with functions that would enable them to discharge duties under the Act in relation to persons in school premises. My department proposes to specify the Education Authority as manager of controlled schools, boards of governors of all voluntary schools, and grant-maintained integrated schools and proprietors of independent schools. My department may also specify public service bodies other than schools, provided the specified bodies are statutory bodies serving the public or the public interest. So my department proposes to specify the Education Authority in relation to statutory youth settings. It's education other than its school settings and in relation to its administrative accommodation. Other arm's-length bodies that meet the definition of public service body under the Act are also included in the draft regulations. These are the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, the Northern Ireland Council for Curriculum Examinations and Assessment, and the General Teaching Council for Northern Ireland. These bodies are all specified in relation to their administrative accommodation. So, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, there are several arm's-length bodies in the education sector that cannot be specified because they are not statutory. These include the Catholic Schools Trust Service and the Controlled Schools Support Council and the Governing Bodies Association. For these bodies, I understand that it is intended that they will, however, be captured under regulations being made by the Department for the Economy. This is because they are located in St Mary's University College and Stranmillis University College. There are other bodies which could make provision on a voluntary basis, even though they cannot be specified in the regulations. These are the Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education, SENA-G and Middleton Centre for Autism. As already stated, the Act allows my department to provide descriptions of persons and premises in order to ensure that the Act can be made workable in the education sector. The proposed regulations do contain such descriptions. Firstly, descriptions of premises. In the case of schools, regulations will include all buildings comprising school premises. This means all buildings used for non-educational purposes, for example eating, leisure or sport, as well as those used for learning, will be captured so long as they form part of the premises of the school. This will be important in ensuring reasonable ease of access to free products, which is required under the Act. In the education other than at school and statutory youth settings, they are captured where those settings are on Education Authority premises, whether leased or owned. However, community-based youth and EOTAS settings cannot be captured in the regulations as they are not statutory organisations. These gaps in provision may not have been intentional when the Act was being drafted. However, again, provision in such settings could be made on a voluntary basis. Regulations will include administrative accommodation leased or owned by a specified public service body for the purpose of effecting its statutory functions. And as I said earlier, CCMS, CCEA and the GTCNI are included in the proposed list of public service bodies in relation to their administrative accommodation. Moving on to the description of persons contained in the draft regulations, my department proposes to limit provision in all settings to pupils, staff and visitors on school premises or in EOTAS settings, young people, staff and visitors in statutory youth settings and staff and visitors in the administrative accommodation of specified public service bodies. In all cases, visitor is identified as a person with legitimate reason for being on the premise. This is to ensure that the general public is not entitled to go into these settings to obtain free period products. This is particularly important for safeguarding children and young people. An 8-week public consultation was undertaken on these proposals. Bodies consulted included the Department of Education's arm's-length bodies, schools and my department's wider stakeholder base. 47 responses were received, which provided useful clarification on points of detail, but did not necessitate a significant change to the policy proposals. The response to this consultation is published on my department's website. In terms of the cost of provision for free period products, I anticipate this to be in the region of £900,000 per year. I am hopeful that this funding will be made available to support the effective implementation of the legislation. Upon approval of these draft regulations, my department will conduct a short period of consultation with the specified public service bodies. This consultation will be in relation to guidance that is to be provided under the Act. Once that guidance is published, the specified public service bodies are required to consult with product users on the arrangements to be put in place for providing free period products. Both consultations are a requirement of the Act itself and must be properly carried out. Can I thank the Committee for Education for its consideration of these draft regulations, and I hope that I've addressed some of the points that were raised at recent meetings. I am aware that the Committee would wish to ensure that any perhaps unintended gaps in the legislative provision can be addressed in other ways, and my department will commit to work with other departments and organisations to address these gaps as far as possible. So, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I commend these regulations to the House.
Thank you, Minister. I call the Chair of the Education Committee, Mr Nick Matheson.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. And speaking on behalf of the Education Committee, I am pleased to be able to offer the Committee's support for the Draft Period Products Department of Education Specified Public Service Bodies Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. Access to period products should be universally available, as is the case for many other basic hygiene products. The previous Education Committee welcomed the passing of the Period Products Bill, having worked on period product provision for some time, and this current committee is glad to see these regulations now being enacted to allow the bill to become a reality. The previous committee had tabled amendments to the original Period Products Bill to require privacy, confidentiality and consideration of sustainable options in the arrangements for provision of period products, which were accepted by the Assembly. It also recommended a co-educational awareness-raising approach to the rollout of the scheme to reduce period stigma and present sustainable options. Since the restoration of devolution, the Education Committee has heard from officials within the department on the work they have undertaken on these regulations. Under the Act, provision is to be sufficient to meet a person's needs while on the premises of a specified public service body, as has been set out by the Minister. A policy on the way forward for take-home provision for pupils, which is currently provided through the school's pilot scheme, will need to be agreed in the context of the universal scheme, again as referenced by the Minister, which will be delivered by TEO, and we look forward to hearing more about how this will be implemented and brought forward. I will not go into detail around the specified bodies, as the Minister has covered that in detail. Department of Education officials were able to provide committee clarity on the costings of the provision, and the committee were particularly concerned on the interface between statutory and non-statutory provision and the sustainability of funding going forward for those measures. The department suggested the cost of this provision could be in the region of €0.8 million per annum. Funding will need to be bid for and expenditure subject to business case approval. So the committee will be keen to hear from the Minister what assurances can be given that funding for this raft of measures will indeed be protected. I want to pay tribute to the department. They have led the way with their period dignity pilot scheme, and we know that this resource has been broadly welcomed by those who use it. The provision of free period products, particularly in schools, has gone some way to helping break down the taboo and stigma that can sometimes be associated with periods, whilst also providing those in need with access to products in a dignified manner. Period products legislation intended to improve access to education, work and sport, alongside improving dignity for women, girls and those who menstruate. The provision of period products is a gender equality issue, and we should all be championing any sort of provision which focuses on equal educational opportunity for all. It also highlights the importance of improving understanding of menstruation and creating supportive, empowering conversations about periods. So, taking all of that into account, the committee has agreed to recommend that the draft period products regulations be affirmed and made by the Assembly. And if I can just add, as Alliance Education spokesperson, that they're very happy to support those regulations for all the reasons discussed by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I call Cara Hunter.
Thank you, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister and his department for their work on this important piece of legislation, and I welcome survey results that were recently given to the Education Committee talking about young women and girls feeling far more confident in school as a direct result of having access to these products, and that's what we want to see, is a higher attendance of young girls in school, an increase in appetite to partake in sports both in and outside of the classroom. And just on this legislation, I'd like to thank the previous period poverty activists like Katrina at Menstruation Matters, Period Poverty NI, and many more for their commitment in tackling period poverty in all of our communities across the North. And recognising this need, I think it's important that us as MLAs within our offices provide these products as well, just recognising the financial pressures that so many families and individuals are currently under. Lastly and briefly, I would like to thank Pat Catney, former SDLP MLA, for bringing forward this important piece of legislation, and I shared an office with Pat, terribly fond of him, and he was a grandfather who really realised the impact, the lack of equality and the detriment as a direct result of lack of access to these products and what it was doing to young women and girls. So I think I'd just like to thank Pat for his input. We're extremely proud of him in this achievement, and I really hope that this legislation continues to create positive outcomes for women and girls across the North. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. I call Cathy Mason.
Nobody should have to suffer the indignity of using unsuitable materials to mask their periods, or to have to choose between putting food on the table and buying period products for themselves or for their children. Period products are essential. They are not luxury items. And for many people and families who are struggling with the rising cost of living, this can be a financial burden and a huge worry. Concordia, no girl should ever miss school or school activities because she cannot access these products. Free access to sanitary products should be the norm in schools, universities, colleges, workplace, football grounds and concert venues and many more. And Sinn Féin will continue to campaign for this within the Assembly and our local councils. At a recent meeting of the Education Committee, as has been said, concerns were raised as why the non-statutory bodies like the Council for Integrated Education, Comhairle na Gael Scoileachta and the Middletown Centre for Autism cannot be included in the provision of products. But I do welcome that this has come before us today, and as this bill progresses, we would expect the Department to work very constructively with these bodies and to support them to be able to provide period products in their settings. Gormila Melgov.
Thank you, Cathy. I call Cheryl Brownlee.
Thank you, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker. I rise today simply to welcome this motion and to commend the Minister and all those who have played a part in getting the motion to this stage. This motion is an important one and represents another significant step in the right direction to ensure that no female is ever disadvantaged due to period poverty. It's heartening to see a number of government, sectoral and voluntary organisations running their own pilots and schemes to provide free period products in our public spaces. The success and demand for these schemes shows a clear need that still exists here in Northern Ireland for free period products. Period products are not optional. They are a basic necessity for women and girls, and it is important that they're accessible to all. It is pleasing to see that this is no longer a taboo subject and that many individuals and organisations continue to speak up and stand up to ensure that women and girls can access the products they need when they need them. Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I absolutely support this motion and I thank all that have worked so hard to bring this to the floor today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I now call on the Minister to wind on the debate on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, and can I thank everyone in the House for participating in this debate around these regulations, and to the Chairman for the work on the committee. Again, just acknowledge that, and for his kind remarks in commending the Department for taking a lead in this area, and the other members who commented on this quite rightly highlight the importance of making sure that free period products are accessible. It's a necessity. And we need to make sure that it is provided in a dignified manner for those that need it, because there should be no barriers within our educational settings for girls when it comes to being in school, and it is helping to break down those taboo areas as well. And can I just share in terms of what Ms Hunter said around Pat Catney? He was an Assembly colleague of mine, and I know this was an area that he brought forward a private member's bill in respect of, and spoke passionately about bringing it forward, and just once again on the public record acknowledge his work and what he did carry out whenever he was a member of this place for Lagan Valley. So I commend the regulations to the House.
Thank you, Minister. So the question is that the motion standing on the order paper be approved. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any noes? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you, Minister.